Before we begin, take a deep breath. Let your eyes close or soften wherever you are, whatever time it is, you're here now. You're safe. Welcome back to this quiet space. Before we go further, I'd love if you could leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I read every one. It helps us feel a little closer, even in the stillness. And if this kind of story helps you, if you want more of these long, quiet journeys, consider subscribing. I'd love to see you again. Now, come with me. Let's begin the story of your life as a knight. Your story begins far from castles and battlefields. It begins in the soft green belly of the countryside, where the hills rise gently and the sky holds its color longer than you remember. You are a child, not poor, but not noble, just enough to eat, just enough to be left alone. You live near the edge of the woods in a cottage warmed by stone and smoke, and the sound of your mother's voice humming through the beams. Your father is a cooper, a barrel maker, and you help him sometimes, though your fingers aren't strong enough yet. He laughs when you drop the mallet. You'll be strong enough someday, just not today. You remember that line for the rest of your life. You carry it into places he never lives to see. You don't dream of glory, not yet, but you do dream of horses, of riding beyond the fields you've seen, of wearing something that shines. Sometimes while fetching water from the stream, you find smooth stones and pretend they are coins. You store them in a pouch and say they are for your war horse's feed. You tell stories to the chickens, practicing your heroic voice. You rescue sticks from puddles and call them lost swords. And one day when you're 11, a real knight passes through your village. His armor is not gleaming, it's dull with dust. Dented at the knees, the mark of someone who's seen the worst of things and kept going anyway. But he looks like a story. He speaks to no one but the priest, stays one night, leaves before sunrise. But you see him, and he sees you, just for a moment. That look becomes a fire under your ribs that doesn't go out. You begin training in secret. You run farther each morning, up the hill behind the orchard, where the grass thickens and the wind carries the crows. You build your own wooden sword, crude and splintered. You learn to lift water buckets with both arms, to swing them like weights. You listen to the old man who once served in a war and now drinks alone by the mill. He tells you where to aim, where to stand, where to place your feet so you don't fall. You ask your mother to stitch padding into your coat. You say it's for the cold. She doesn't believe you, but she does it anyway. One day when you're 14, you leave the cottage without telling anyone. You walk 23 miles to the castle. Your feet bleed, but you never stop. And when you arrive, you ask to become a page. The guard laughs, then stops laughing when he sees your eyes. They take you in, not because you're special, but because you didn't ask to be. You work harder than anyone. You clean armor, sweep ash, learn to speak only when spoken to, but you watch. You notice everything. How knights stand when they rest. How squires polish shields with circles, not lines. You notice that the best fighters never boast. You sleep in a room with 5 others. You miss your mother's bread. You miss the trees. But one morning you hold a sword for the first time. Not pretend, not wood, not play, real, cold, waiting. And something in you changes, not loudly, just a shift, like the wind turning. You are still a child, but now the path ahead is clearer, not easier, but yours. The sword is heavier than you expect. Your fingers ache after only a few minutes. You don't say anything. You just shift your grip. Try again. Your mentor is a man named Sir Darren. He's not tall, not loud, but when he walks into the practice yard, even the birds go quiet. He doesn't praise, doesn't yell, just corrects. With precision, with calm. When you swing too wide, he says, waste of motion. When you lunge without balance, he says, fall in battle once you'll remember. And when you land your first clean strike after months of trying, he says only good. but that one word fills your chest like sunlight. Training becomes your world. Before dawn, after dusk, you practice forms until your legs tremble. You spar with squires older, stronger. You lose, often, but you never stop. You begin to notice pain not as something to avoid, but as a language, a message. You sleep on a cot so thin it might as well be the floor. You eat quickly, speak rarely, dream of nothing but steel and silence. Yet, in the quiet moments, you find something else growing, a calm, a certainty. You are not yet a knight, but you are no longer pretending. One day, a visitor to the castle watches you train. She is older, sharp-eyed, wears a pendant of pale blue stone. She speaks to the steward, then points at you. "That one," she says. "Send him." You don't know what it means. But the next day, you ride out with 3 others, older squires. A caravan guard mission, not glamorous, not glorious, but real. You ride in the rain. You sleep in a barn. You chase off thieves who are more hungry than dangerous. You learn how to patch leather with cold hands, how to keep watch without drifting, how to look like you know what you're doing even when you don't. No one thanks you. But at the end of the journey, the merchant nods and says, "You didn't run." And for some reason that means more than you expected. You ride back to the castle changed, not taller, not tougher, just more still. When you're 16, you see your first battlefield, not as a knight, not even as a fighter. You're there to help, carry water, deliver orders, hold the reins of the war horses while the real soldiers mount. But you see what war looks like. You smell it. Steel and sweat and something deeper. Fear, maybe, or memory. You watch Sir Darren ride into the fray without shouting, without ceremony. You see him on horse, a man in red armor. You see him fall once, rise again. You carry a wounded soldier back to the cart. He's young, bleeding from the thigh. He asks, "Did I do something worth remembering?" You lie and say yes. He dies before nightfall. After the battle, you sit alone beneath a tree. You've washed your hands 4 times, but they still feel wet. You stare at your sword, still sheathed, untouched, and you wonder if you're meant for this. Not the fight, the aftermath, the weight of it. Sirdarin finds you. He doesn't speak, just sits beside you. After a long time he says, "A sword is the last thing a knight should be known for." You nod. You don't understand yet, but you will. You will carry that line through every oath, every march, every decision. One day it will save a life. One day it will save yours. You are 17 when you are given your own horse. Not gifted, assigned. She is not beautiful. Her coat is patchy in places, her left ear torn from an old fight, but her eyes are steady. Her name is Bren, and the first time you ride her, she tests you, pulls left, stops without asking. But you do not pull harder. You speak softly. You wait. And within a week you ride as one. She does not gallop unless she chooses to. You never force her to. This is your first true bond as a knight. Not with steel, not with command, but with a creature who owes you nothing. You groom her at night with your own hands. You never ask a page to do it. Some knights mock this. Others watch quietly, and then start doing the same. There comes a time when you are called to stand in court. The lord of the castle asks your name, asks what you want. You say, "To serve." He frowns. "Not to rise." You say, "If the rising does not serve, it is not rising." Behind him someone smiles. Someone else writes your name on a ledger. You don't ask why. Later, Ser Darren tells you it means your name will be remembered. You think about the boy you were, the stones in your pouch, the pretend battles in the orchard. You think about your father's hands, the way your mother folded bread into your satchel. You whisper to yourself, "Let memory be enough." You don't want glory. You want to be good. And good takes longer. You begin to mentor younger pages. Not because anyone tells you to, but because you remember how it felt to be unnoticed. You teach them not just how to hold a blade, but how to read a face. You tell them how knights must listen before they act, how fear is not something to conquer, but something to understand. One boy asks you, "What's the hardest part?" You think for a long time, then say, "Coming home." He doesn't understand. That's fine. He will, one day. You place your hand on his shoulder, and for a moment you feel like a tree that knows it will give shelter long after it's done growing. That winter, your patrol is ambushed. You survive, barely. A blade cuts across your shoulder. You don't feel it at first. You keep fighting, not for victory, for the others. When it's over, you collapse. You wake days later in the infirmary. Your arm bound in linen, your breath shallow. Ser Darren is there. He says nothing about the fight, just says you did not leave anyone behind. You sleep again, for a long time. When you rise, you find a cloth folded beside your bed. Inside, a note. Just 4 words. You are still here. You don't know who left it. You don't ask. But you keep the cloth with you always. It becomes your banner, small, silent, unseen by most. But it reminds you that being alive is its own kind of knighthood. Spring returns. Slowly, as it always does. And with it, a summons. You are to be knighted. Not because of one act, but because of many small ones. Because you did not run. Because you listen. Because you wait before drawing steel. You kneel in the hall before the court. You do not tremble. You do not burn with pride. You feel quiet, grounded. Like a door closing gently behind you. A new one opening ahead. The sword touches each shoulder. The room fades. All you hear is your own breath. And a memory of your father saying, "You'll be strong enough someday, just not today." Today you are strong enough not because you seek power, but because you've learned how to hold it softly. They call you Sir now. The first time it happens, you almost don't turn your head. You're still getting used to it. Not the honor, but the echo. The way the word feels heavier than armor. Sir. A sound shaped by others, given to you not as reward, but as trust. You accept it quietly, not with grand speeches, but with smaller things. You rise earlier than you used to. You clean your own tack. You keep bread in your satchel for those with less. The squire assigned to you is nervous. His name is Marin. His eyes are too big for his face, and he speaks too quickly. But he learns. And when he stumbles, you say nothing. You just show him again. One day he calls you Sir with more steadiness than before. You say you'll call someone else that one day. Make sure you earn it first in silence. Your first command comes sooner than expected. A border dispute. Nothing noble, nothing sung, just fields, rights, fear. You're told to go, not to fight, but to calm. You take Bren. You wear no plume, no colors, just a plain cloak. When you arrive, the air is brittle with tension. Farmers holding tools like weapons. Soldiers with swords they hope not to use. You dismount. Speak slowly. You listen before you speak. You ask names before sides. It takes hours, days. But the blade never leaves your sheath. A child tugs your cloak and says, "You look like someone who doesn't shout." You nod. That evening, an elder gives you a folded cloth, plain, frayed. For remembering this was your first real victory. You keep it tucked in your belt for years. The years after are not filled with glory. They are filled with work, quiet work, long rides, broken roads, decisions that never feel clean. You hold the line between duty and doubt. You save a town by standing still. You protect a messenger too young to understand the message. You deliver food through a storm and lose 3 toes to the cold. No ballads are written, but in small places your name is known not with fanfare but with respect, in whispers. He stayed when others left. She listened before judging. That was a night. You learn that reputation is not something built. It is something left behind in rooms you no longer stand in. You see war again. Not your first, not your last. It is worse this time. You lose friends. You hold the hand of a soldier who can no longer see. You carry the wounded farther than your body should allow. You write letters for the dying, and when the final horn blows and the banners are lowered, you do not cheer. You sit beside a burned oak and close your eyes. The wind touches your face like an old friend who no longer has words. That night, a fellow knight gives you a cup of wine and says, "I would have followed you into worse." You nod. And later, alone, you take out your folded cloth from years ago and hold it between your palms. You say nothing. It says enough. One winter, you return home. Not the castle, not the court. Home. The cottage still stands. Smaller now, the woods thinner. Your father's tools still hang on the wall. You sit in the same spot by the fire. Your mother is gone. Your father too, but you feel them there. In the way the chair creaks, in the scent of ash and flour. You place a folded cloth on the mantel. No message, just presence, just proof that you returned. That the boy who dreamed of armor came back with something better than glory. He came back with memory, and the knowledge that a knight is not made on the battlefield, but in the spaces in between where no one is watching, and you choose the quiet path anyway. Time does not announce itself. It settles. You notice it in the way your hands close more slowly, in the ache of joints after long rides, in the way young knights look at you, not as one of them, but as something they are trying to become. You don't fight it. You don't cling to the days when your armor shone brighter. You polish your blade less often now, not because it's no longer sharp, but because you no longer feel the need to prove that it is. You teach more, not in great halls, in stables, in quiet walks. Overbred, you say less, they listen more. You find yourself repeating one sentence often. What you carry is heavier than what you wear. Some understand, others won't for years. That's all right. Seeds take time. You keep riding, not for war, for presence. You visit villages where no knight has passed in years. You carry no banner, just your horse, your silence, and a satchel filled with folded cloths. You've begun the habit quietly, leaving one behind in each place you pass, on a bench, in a chapel, beside a cradle. Each one holds something, a thought, a line, a moment no one else saw. You don't sign them, you don't tell anyone why, but you hope they're found. And sometimes, months later, someone passes you in a market or along the road and says softly, "I read something you left behind. It helped me stay." You bow, you say thank you, then you ride on. One day, you come across a town in mourning. Fire took half the homes. Rain took what the fire didn't. You don't try to fix it. You listen. You help lift what can be lifted. You eat beside them, sleep in the hall. You speak only when asked. A child sits beside you and says, "You're not like the other knights." You ask, "Why?" She says, "You don't take up all the space." That night, you fold a cloth for her. You stitch just 3 words. You belong here. You leave it beside her bed before riding out. Years later, she becomes a knight, and her first act after being named is to leave a folded cloth on the ground where she once saw you sit. You grow older, you do not fear it. You begin to feel time not as a thief, but as a scribe. It has written its story into your shoulders, your knees, your spine, but your gaze is steady, your grip still sure, and your silence richer. You are invited often to court. You decline more than you accept. You are asked to lead. You recommend others. You do not seek position, you seek peace. And when you find it, you protect it, not with steel, but with your choice to remain steady when others sway. You become a story, not a legend, something quieter, the kind of tale people pass over bread. There was a knight once who stayed behind after the battle to bury even the enemy dead. You never hear them speak it, but you feel it in how strangers look at you with recognition they can't explain. One night, in the quiet between seasons, you sit alone beside a small stream. Your horse grazes nearby. You unfold a cloth you've carried since you were a squire. It is frayed. The words have faded, but you remember what it said. You are still here. You breathe it in. You fold it again. And then you take a fresh piece. You hold it in your palm, smooth it out, then stitch a single word into the edge. Stay. You do not know who it is for, only that someone someday will need it. You place it beneath a stone, then rise. The night is cool, the wind is soft, and as you mount your horse you do not look back, not because you don't care, but because you have finally learned what matters does not need to be watched to endure. It only needs to be left with care. The world shifts slowly when you've been watching it long enough. Castles change banners. Rivers change course. Roads grow where forests once stood. And you, still breathing, still riding, begin to see the long story, not just the moment. You pass a village you once helped defend. No one remembers your name, but someone has built a bench where you once stood in the rain. There are flowers growing beside it. A child is sleeping on it, safe. You leave a folded cloth beneath the bench. No note, just the fold. You walk away without needing to be thanked. Some would call that humility. You call it returning something that was never yours to begin with. You begin writing, not for fame, not for record, just to remember. You write lines you've whispered to trees. Names of the ones who didn't return, thoughts you couldn't say aloud in war. You do not bind these pages. You fold them. Each one becomes a cloth, and each cloth a kind of offering. You place them in a wooden chest at the edge of your dwelling, not to preserve, just to rest. When visitors arrive, some ask to see them. You never refuse. But you do ask, will you take one with you, if you feel it belongs to you? Some do. Others simply read and weep. The chest never empties. You keep writing, not daily, just when the air feels heavy with memory. Marin visits you, now a knight in his own right. He wears scars and softness with equal weight. He brings bread, tells you what the world is like now. He still rides out, still protects, still listens. You ask him, what do they call you now? He shrugs. The quiet one, he says. You smile. You hand him a folded cloth, one you wrote years ago, never knowing who it was for. It says, let them underestimate you. Still waters carve the deepest paths. He holds it with both hands. Doesn't speak. Doesn't need to. That evening he helps you feed the fire. You sit in silence for nearly an hour. When he leaves the next morning he bows. Not formally, just enough to say, you shaped what I became. Your body grows slower, but your mind stays sharp. You wake with the dawn even when there's no ride to take. You tend a garden now, small, stubborn, generous with herbs. Children come sometimes to help, though they tire quickly. You teach them not how to fight, but how to fold. You show them how cloth can carry what voice cannot. A girl once asked, is this magic? You said, no, but it's close. And she believed you. They start leaving cloths in your garden gate. Some with drawings, some with words. One just had a single stitched heart. They don't know what to call you. Some say knight, some say elder, some say friend. You don't correct them. Each name is true in its own time. One morning, long after frost has left the fields, you wake with the kind of ache that speaks clearly, not pain, but release. You dress slowly, feed the horse now old, but still proud. You sit at your writing table and fold one last cloth. It says only this was enough. You place it in the chest. Then you step outside. The wind is warm. The sky is open. And for once you do not feel the weight of your armor, because you are not wearing any. You sit beneath the old tree you planted when you first returned from war. You close your eyes, and you breathe, not out of duty, not from exhaustion, just because it is a good day to be still. And in that stillness you do not end. You fold, gently, into memory, into legacy, into the quiet that carries. The garden remains. The tree stands, The chest of folded cloths stays dry, even in the rain. No one announces your passing. There is no parade, no decree, no statue cast in your image. And yet, people arrive, slowly, wordlessly, one by one. A child who once played in your garden leaves a bundle of time at the gate. A former squire lays a stone beside the tree with your name scratched in soft lines. A rider from the far north ties a folded cloth to the branch of the tree and says nothing before riding off. Someone places a spoon on your windowsill. Someone else leaves a cup of warm broth. It is as though the world in its own quiet language is saying, "We remember you, not for your victories, but for your stillness." The chest is eventually opened, not by force, not by accident, but by care. A young woman, a student of stories, finds it while walking the old border trail. She recognizes the folds. She has heard of them. Cloths that carry memory, wrapped in silence, handed without fanfare. Then another. She cries at the 5th, smiles at the 12th. She takes 3 with her, leaves 2 she has made, and then she carries the rest not away but onward to others, to places that don't yet know the power of quiet witness. She does not claim them. She doesn't have to. Her presence carries their origin, and that's enough. Years pass. The tree grows thick with time. Its roots shift the path slightly. Travelers who sit in its shade feel rested without knowing why. The garden blooms longer each year, even when frost comes early. No one owns the land, but everyone tends to it. Someone refills the well. Someone clears the leaves. Cloths still appear beneath the bench. Folded notes are tied with twine and tucked into the bark. It is not a shrine. It is a place that listens. The kind of place people find when they aren't sure what they're looking for and leave with something they didn't know they were missing. Peace, pause, permission to be quiet. In the listener's archive, hundreds of miles away, a single package arrives. It is wrapped in coarse linen. Inside are 6 cloths, a sprig of dried mint, and a page with no salutation, just a line. This night taught us how to stay. The archivist reads it slowly, folds the page into a soft triangle, and adds it to a growing collection marked "Those Who Remained." A new volume is started. Your name is written, not in bold, but in a hand that looks like it was written while remembering how someone once made you feel safe. The cloths are placed between volumes of other quiet warriors, other listeners, other steady hands. You are not alone there. You never were. And in places where your feet never stepped, nations that speak other tongues, lands where the wind smells of spices you never tasted, there are now folds. Cloths wrapped around grief or hope or quiet joy. A girl carries one in the hem of her cloak. A soldier folds one into his armor. A teacher leaves one on every student's desk before the final lesson of the year. And not one of them knows your whole name, but they know how to wait, how to breathe before answering, how to hold space without rushing to fill it. They've inherited you, not in blood, but in practice. In the stillness you carried like a banner no one saw, but everyone felt. You are not gone. You have simply become the silence that helps others remember who they are. He is young, barely grown, his armor still too loose around the shoulders. His name is Kalen. He walks like someone learning to carry something sacred. The world around him moves fast, too fast. Lords argue, roads crack, small villages go unguarded. He is not the strongest, not the loudest, but there's a steadiness in the way he listens, in the way he watches the hands of those who are tired. He comes upon your tree by accident. The road veered when the river rose, and now he finds himself beneath your branches, breathless, lost, unsure. He sits on the bench, places his helm beside him, notices a folded cloth tucked near the roots. He unfolds it slowly. 5 words. You are not too late. He stays for hours, says nothing, just breathes, reads the other cloths, gathers fallen leaves, rebuilds the stone ring around the tree. It's not reverence, it's response. When he finally rises, he places one cloth of his own. It has no words, only a shape stitched in dark thread, the silhouette of a horse with its head bowed low. He leaves quietly, but he does not forget. Weeks later, in a town cracked from conflict, he kneels beside a crying boy, says nothing, just sits until the crying fades. Then he offers him a folded cloth, blank, warm, and walks away. The boy opens it days later and tells his mother, "I think it held stillness." She doesn't understand, but she tucks it into her sleeve. Kalen begins to fold often. He leaves cloths on thresholds, inside ruined barns, beside broken walls. He becomes known not for his sword, but for what he does after the fight. A woman with frostbite wakes to find one tucked into her glove. A horse limping through cold fields finds one tied gently to the gate, its fabric infused with balm. No one catches him leaving them. No one needs to. The cloths become a rumor, then a rhythm. And when someone finally asks, "Why do you do it?" he says, "Because someone did it before me." That's all. No name, no story, just a continuation. A long inhale after a held breath. In a quiet town near the sea, a healer receives one. It's folded into the crook of her door. She carries it for weeks before realizing it helps her breathe easier at night. She doesn't know why. So she starts folding too. For her patients, for strangers, for herself. Her sister begins to write inside hers, "Small blessings. You're still good. The pain doesn't mean you failed. Let go slowly." That counts too. The folds travel beyond the healer's town. People who never met Kellen begin to say his name anyway. The cloth knight. The one who leaves gentleness where others leave dust. The knight who stays after the battle. He hears the whispers. He never answers them. He's too busy folding the next one. At the archive, a new package arrives. Inside cloths, more than a dozen, different hands, different threads, different silences. One envelope, no sender, just a phrase. It's spreading again, like it used to. Philly, older now, opens the cloths, one by one, smiles, cries, just a little. Ash places them in the newest volume. Rhoda traces the horse silhouette onto a ledger page. Fen plays one soft note on the reed flute and says, "This feels like the beginning again." Philly nods, says, "No, not the beginning, the remembering." And somewhere riding through dusk, with folded cloths pressed against his ribs, Kalen feels the air grow warmer, not from sun, from legacy. From a path made soft by someone who walked it without ever needing to be seen. Callan rides farther than he ever thought he would. Not for conquest, not for gold. He rides because the folds have begun to guide him, not with maps, but with need. Someone tells him of a village where the wells have dried. He goes, leaves water and cloth, no questions. Someone else speaks of a boy who hasn't spoken since the soldiers came. Callan sits with him in silence, just sits. And when he leaves, he gives the boy a fold with only a leaf inside, pressed perfect green. Days later, the boy speaks again, not of the war, not of fear, just of the leaf. "It was still alive," he says, "so maybe I can be too." The healer writes that down, folds it, places it on her window. She begins to believe in small survival again. In a forest clearing, Kalen meets another knight, older, scarred. Their armor is dull, their eyes sharper than blades. They watch Kalen with suspicion. "Why no colors, no banner?" Kalen replies, "Because the people I serve already live where I ride." The other knight says nothing, just sharpens their sword. But when Kalen rises to leave, he sees a cloth folded near the fire. It says, "I didn't think we were allowed to care this quietly." Kalen doesn't take it. He bows to it, leaves his own. "We always were." He rides on, not knowing that the other knight will stay behind, teaching squires how to fold cloth before ever drawing steel. He begins hearing stories of folds in places he's never been. A folded note under a prisoner's plate, A cloth tied around the wrist of a child walking home alone. A merchant who gives out one with every purchase. No charge, no explanation, just comfort. The cloths are taking root. They carry no single name, no single voice, and that's what makes them strong. They belong to anyone who chooses to listen before speaking, to stay behind when everyone else leaves. Kalen stops feeling like he's the one carrying it. He realizes he's part of the carrying, one hand among many, and that's more freeing than anything he ever imagined. He returns to the tree once, the one where you left your last cloth, the one where this all began. It's taller now, wiser, somehow. The path to it has become smooth, as if many have come here over time. He finds a folded cloth beneath the roots. It's not his, it's old, stitched faintly. I hope this helped you become someone gentler. He folds it again, adds his own beneath it, then sits. He doesn't stay long, just enough to breathe in the memory, just enough to remind the soil. I remember the one who made this possible. Before he leaves, he ties one cloth to a branch. We keep walking, together. The wind lifts it slightly, like a nod. The listener's archive adds a new section. They call it Echoes of the Fold. It's not chronological, not geographic. It isn't tracked by name, it's organized by feeling. Entries like the silence after someone forgave themselves, the moment a hand opened instead of closed, the stillness shared between two who didn't know how to say goodbye. In the margins, Ely writes one line, "The folds now fold themselves." And that evening, as the wind curls through the archive's open windows, she lights a candle and reads the first page aloud, not for an audience, but for the quiet that has always listened back. And far away beneath a wide night sky, Kalen folds a new cloth and writes nothing inside it, because this one he knows will speak for itself. The land begins to shift again. Seasons pass faster now. Callan grows into his face. His shoulders no longer hold tension, they hold trust. Villagers know him not for his sword, but for his silence. He doesn't stay long anywhere, but when he leaves, something remains. A deeper quiet, a steadier breath. In one town, the baker begins giving folded notes with every loaf. In another, a carpenter teaches apprentices how to fold fabric before sanding wood, saying, "So your hands remember gentleness first." No one calls it knighthood, but it is. Not with ceremony, not with titles, just the kind of presence that doesn't need to be explained to be felt. Callan writes less now. He folds more, he listens more. In one village, a boy asks, "How do I become like you?" Callan kneels, places a cloth in the boy's palm and says, "Start by listening to someone who's never been asked how they're really doing." The boy does. And years later, he too becomes known for his quiet. The world doesn't always notice this kind of lineage. It moves too fast, too loud. But those who pause know, those who carry the folds know. And the path, once narrow, begins to widen with others walking it beside him, not behind, not in front. Together, not in uniform, but in rhythm. There is one village where no one speaks when he arrives, not because they are unkind, but because they are grieving. A storm took too much. A fire came after. Kalen says nothing. He helps rebuild. He gathers stones for the wall. He shares his bread. On the third day, someone leaves a folded cloth on the table where he eats. Inside, one line, "You reminded us how to hold each other without falling apart." He presses the cloth to his chest, then tucks it into his satchel. Later, he walks to the center of town and lays down his sword, not as surrender, as offering, as promise. "Use it," he says, "only if you can't find another way." They nod, they keep it, but it is never drawn. At night, Callan dreams of things he's never seen. A city built of folded notes. A child teaching a noble how to stay quiet. A tree growing cloth from its branches. He wakes with a full heart and no need to understand it all. He begins placing folded cloths under stones now, in fields by rivers, in libraries, on ships. He starts writing only one word in each. Words like begin, breathe, stay, ease. He doesn't record them. He lets them go, like seeds, like lanterns, like sighs. And in doing so, he feels something in himself unfold too. Not release, not escape, just opening. The kind of peace that isn't loud, just steady. At the archive, the ledgers grow quiet again, not because the folds have stopped, but because they've gone farther than the archive can follow. Ulti stands before the shelves and says softly, "It's no longer ours to track." Ash nods. Rose stitches one final pattern. Fen plays a lullaby, and they open the windows wide. Let the wind carry the rest. The archive does not close. It does not end. It simply returns to stillness, ready, waiting, as it always has. And far from there, on a hill where the light lingers longer than elsewhere, Kaelin folds a cloth for the last time that year. No thread, no ink, just the fold. Then places it on the earth, says nothing, walks on, and the world, quietly, folds with him. The road is softer now. Callan walks more often than he rides. He feels the ground in his knees. In his spine, he welcomes it. Some paths can't be hurried. He visits places he once passed through as a boy, though they've changed. Trees have grown, houses have leaned inward, names have shifted, but sometimes, just sometimes, someone remembers. A woman at a well hands him a folded cloth without meeting his eye. "You left one of these here years ago," she says. "It carried me longer than I can say." He unfolds it when he's alone. "Inside you reminded me I could wait without shame." He keeps it in his sleeve, walks on. He begins teaching again, not from a pulpit, not with ceremony, just with presence. He shows others how to fold before they speak, how to stay after the question is asked. In one village he sits with an old knight who's forgotten how to hold a sword. Kaelin says, "You don't need to. You held long enough." The man cries, then laughs, then sleeps more peacefully than he has in years. In another he kneels beside a child digging in the mud and helps shape the hole. "For what?" the child asks. Kaelin replies, "Sometimes something grows here." The child nods as if that makes perfect sense, leaves a folded leaf in the dirt. Kaelin folds a cloth beside it. 2 offerings. One message: you don't need to understand it all. There's a town that builds a wall of folded cloths, not to divide, to remind. Each visitor leaves one, some with words, others blank, some stained with tears, some kissed in the corner. They call it the listening wall. Kaelin visits, but leaves nothing. He just runs his fingers across the edges, feels the weight of what's been held. He sits beneath it for an afternoon, not praying, not meditating, just letting the silence speak back. Before leaving, someone hands him a cloth from the wall. "We think this one waited for you." He opens it. Inside only this: "You are still part of the reason we trust each other." He places it over his heart, walks away with quieter feet. The horse is gone now. Old age took her gently. Kaelin buried her himself, folded a cloth for her, tied it to a low branch above the resting place. "You carried me farther than I earned." He hasn't ridden since, doesn't need to. His presence travels farther than hooves ever could. He moves through the world like a page turned slowly, deliberate, full of margin. He doesn't fill space, he offers it, and people take it, sit beside him, say things they haven't said to anyone, leave lighter. Not because he solves anything, but because he doesn't try to fix what was never broken, just bruised, just waiting to be heard. At night he dreams of water, always water. Sometimes still, sometimes moving, sometimes rain falling on a folded cloth that doesn't open. In his waking hours he begins placing cloths near rivers now, watching as some drift away, others remain. One morning, he wakes to find someone else has placed one beside his campfire. It's marked with a circle, open on one side. Inside, "You showed me where to enter." He doesn't know who left it. He doesn't try to find out. He just folds it again, places it near his chest, then turns to the morning light and walks again. A night still, but one who no longer needs armor, only the folds and the road. The road begins to feel like home more than any house ever did. Kalen no longer counts the days between towns. He walks until the air changes, until someone needs something, or until his heart tells him, pause here. He stops in places others pass through, crossroads, broken fences, forgotten chapels. He speaks little, sleeps light, and leaves each place better in a way few notice. A repaired gate latch, a cloth left on a bench, a listening ear in the middle of someone's unraveling. He does not linger unless asked, but when he goes, the silence he leaves behind feels warmer than before. One evening, he finds a group of travelers arguing. The cart has broken. No one knows how to fix it. Tension swells like thunder. Kalen says nothing. He kneels by the axle, repairs it in quiet. When done, he ties a folded cloth to the cart's side, walks on. The travelers read it later, after the storm. It says, "You were not failing. You were overwhelmed." They don't know his name, but they speak of him later with respect. There was a man once who helped us, without needing thanks. The story is passed on, changed, shortened, but the feeling remains. That's the part that matters. In a distant village, he meets a woman who has been carrying a cloth for 20 years. She doesn't remember where she found it, just that it held her together when she nearly left everything. She shows it to him, frayed at the corners, stitched with a single line, "You are not invisible." He recognizes the fold. It was his, one of his earliest. He doesn't say that, he only nods. She weeps quietly. "I don't know why it helped," she says. "It just did." Kalen says, "Sometimes being seen once is enough to carry you through all the unseen days." She folds it again, places it back in her pocket. "It still helps," she whispers. He meets a scribe on the road. Young, restless, eyes full of ink and longing. The scribe asks if he is the knight from the stories. Kalen smiles, shakes his head. "I'm just a man who learned how to stay." The scribe asks if he can write about him. Kalen hesitates, then says, "Only if you leave some parts blank." The scribe is confused. "Why?" Kalen replies, "Because silence is part of the story too." They travel together for 3 days, then part ways without promise. Months later, the scribe writes a book of small stories. One chapter is titled, "The One Who Folded the World into Quiet." It has no character name, no ending, just a line at the bottom. "He helped me hear myself." And one day, after a long ride through rain and memory, Kalen returns to the sea. Not because he planned to, because the road led him there. The waves speak in the voice of things too old to be unkind. He walks the shoreline, leaves a folded cloth in the sand. No message, just the shape. Later, a child finds it, picks it up, doesn't open it, just holds it against her chest. Her father asks why. She says, "It feels like it's listening." And that night, she dreams of a man in a long cloak, walking into the horizon with the kind of peace only those who have stayed long enough to become still ever carry. The sea becomes a companion, not one you speak to, but one you walk beside. Kalen spends weeks near its edge, resting in a fishing village where no one knows his name. He helps repair nets, mends a child's boot with thread from his satchel, says very little but always listens when others do. The townsfolk begin leaving folded cloths by the shore, not as tribute but as practice. Some have drawings. Some have songs written in trembling lines. One simply says, "Thank you for teaching us that patience doesn't mean waiting. It means caring slowly." Kalen finds it one morning tucked into the hollow of a driftwood log. He folds it tighter, keeps it close. Not for memory, for company. A traveler from a distant country arrives in the village. He carries scrolls, speaks 3 languages, and calls Kalen teacher, though he's never met him. "The folds reached us," he explains. "We thought it was folklore, but then we started folding ourselves. and something changed. People stopped shouting. People started staying longer after someone cried. Kalen listens, then hands the traveler a blank cloth. "It's yours now," he says. "Do what the world needs with it," the traveler asks. "And if I fail," Kalen answers, "then fold again." The next day the traveler leaves a cloth behind. It reads, "You reminded me that quiet doesn't mean small." He does not say goodbye, just continues the path. Seasons turn again. Callan begins to slow, but not with regret. His steps remain sure. Even if shorter, he no longer seeks new places. He waits for the folds to lead him. One day, a child knocks at the door of his small stone home near the sea. She holds out a cloth, creased, stitched, handled too many times. "Did you write this?" she asks. Callan reads it. There is time still. He looks at her, smiles gently. "I did," she asks. "Can you teach me?" He nods. And so day by day he does. Not just how to fold, but how to see without judgment, how to sit without fixing, how to speak only when silence has been fully heard. She is his first apprentice, not by blood, but by breath. Her name is Liz. She folds quickly but unevenly at first. "Slow down," Callan says. "Let the cloth teach you its shape." She learns. She watches. She writes her first message at dusk. "I forgive myself for not being ready sooner." He doesn't praise it. He just folds one in return. "You came when it mattered." They begin leaving cloths together. One at the market, one in the chapel, one between the pages of a lost book. Liz grows into the work, as if it were always waiting for her. And Callan, watching her fold with quiet certainty, begins to feel the thread of his own story soften, like a page reaching its final lines, not with a stop, but with a breath. Liz asks one night, "Do you miss the battles?" Callan looks at the fire, thinks for a long time, then says, "Only the ones where I chose peace instead." She doesn't speak, just nods. The next morning she finds a folded cloth beside her bed. It says, "When the sword is heavy, let it rest." Not every day must be carried. She carries it for years, even after Callan's steps fade from the earth and into memory. Even after the sky begins to hold its color a little longer over the sea where he once stood. And when people ask her what he was like, she always answers, "He showed me how to become something without needing to be seen." Liz stays by the sea, long after Callan is gone. She keeps the house swept, the bench by the tree repaired, the folds dry and clean. People still come, not every day, not in crowds, but steadily, quietly. Some ask about the man who once lived there. She tells them the truth. He listened longer than most people speak. They sit with that. Some weep, some leave a cloth, some walk away lighter. She doesn't try to explain the folds. She lets people learn by folding. She gives them blank squares, a needle if they ask, a silence if they don't. Slowly the village becomes something different. Not a shrine, not a school, just a place that remembers how to pause. The children begin to call her the fold keeper. She doesn't correct them. They bring her notes. Try to fold faster than each other. She smiles but always says, "The one who folds slowest hears the cloth best." One girl writes, "I'm afraid of forgetting my father's voice." Liz folds with her, side by side, then whispers, "Some things never disappear. They just become part of how you breathe." That cloth is pinned to the tree, near where Callan's last was left. Wind lifts it gently in the evenings. No one dares remove it, but many sit beneath it when they don't have words for what they're carrying. Liz begins to write again. She fills ledgers, not with history but with fragments. Questions asked in stillness. Words whispered over bread. Messages left under stone. What if I'm not ready to forgive yet? He waited beside me when I couldn't speak. I folded this instead of running. Each one signed with a shape, never a name. She sends some to the archive. Others she leaves on passing carts. Her folds cross borders. They appear in cities that forgot how to whisper, in schools that teach again what gentleness feels like. and all along she carries a cloth from her very first night as an apprentice. It reminds her, not every day must be carried. Far away, the archive grows quiet again, not because it is forgotten, but because it has done what it was meant to do. It listens now more than it records. Ely is older. She walks with a cane now, slower, softer. But when she opens the windows in the morning, the wind that enters always smells like linen and earth. She receives a cloth from the coast, stitched in blue, marked with waves. Inside only a single word, still. She smiles. Not because it's familiar, but because it doesn't need to be. Fenn places it in the newest volume. Rowe adds a swirl to the margin. Ash, still folding, simply says, "They remember." And that is enough. One day, Lys walks beyond the tree, beyond the sea, beyond the roads she has always known. She doesn't leave a message, just places one blank cloth in Kaelin's old chest, then closes the lid. She carries a satchel full of folds and a heart full of breath. No one knows where she goes. Only that someone saw a quiet figure near a river, teaching a traveler how to hold stillness without flinching. And in the places she passes through, new cloths begin to appear, some tied to bridges, others tucked into sleeves, and the people who find them all say the same thing in their own way. It felt like I was allowed to begin again. Lys does not travel quickly. She stops often, sometimes for a night, sometimes for weeks. She chooses places with sharp edges, towns with brittle tempers, crossroads worn by too many departures. She does not announce herself. She simply stays, sweeps a floor, mends a fence, listens longer than most expect. Then one morning someone wakes to find a folded cloth on their doorstep. Another finds one tied to the handle of the town well. Another slipped under a broken doorframe. The folds always say something different, or say nothing at all, but they are always soft, always clean, always placed, never thrown. And gradually the air changes. People slow their steps, voices lower. The village remembers how to soften. In one place she meets a boy who asks too many questions. He follows her, mimics her folding. "Why do you use thread?" he asks. "Because it helps the cloth remember," she answers. "Remember what?" he says. She smiles. That it was touched with care. He begins folding on his own, awkward at first. One day he hands her a cloth with a single word stitched into it. "Hope?" She folds it again, adds her own thread. Still possible. They hang it on the fence post outside the village. Weeks later, someone else ties a fold beside it, then another, until the fence becomes a tapestry of questions, each answered by someone else's willingness to try. Lys walks with less need now. She doesn't seek, she responds. A fire burns through a woodland town. She arrives after, helps wash soot from stone, leaves folds where the smoke has left its shadow. Not to erase, just to witness. One says, "You did not deserve this, and you survived anyway." Another grief is not a debt. It is a memory still asking to be held. A woman finds that one. She places it in a frame, says, "This saved me from drowning without water." Lys does not return for thanks. She's already gone, but the wall remains. The cloths do not fade, and people come just to stand beside them when they can't carry their own weight alone. She returns once to the tree, Callan's tree. The path is overgrown, but the bench still stands. Someone has carved small symbols into the bark. Waves, hands, spirals. She sits beneath the shade and doesn't speak, just folds. She places a cloth at the roots. "You helped me become something I never thought I could be." Then she lays another beside it, blank, her way of saying, "And now it's someone else's turn." A girl passes hours later, sees the cloths. She doesn't take them, but she sits nearby, listens to the wind, then opens her satchel, pulls out a square of her own, and folds it slowly, corners crisp, movements calm, hands steady. And far across the world, where the names are different, where the soil smells of spices and the stars chart other stories. Someone folds a cloth they've never been taught how to make. They do it by instinct. They place it beneath a sleeping stranger. It says, "You don't owe the world your exhaustion." They walk away without being seen. But the person who wakes will never forget the feeling. And the one who folded will never forget how good it felt to give without claiming. And the wind, as always, carries a whisper too soft for the ear, but not too soft for the heart. A whisper that once belonged to a knight who chose stillness. A whisper that says, "We are still folding, still here, still holding the shape of care." Liz travels with fewer words now. She finds herself speaking only when the silence feels fully heard. In one village, a man offers her food in exchange for a story. She accepts the bread, then simply says, "Once someone taught me how to stay." The man nods as if he understands, though no names are spoken. Later she leaves a cloth at his doorstep, no thread, no ink, just a shape, folded twice, placed carefully on a flat stone. The man opens it and weeps, though he cannot say why. That night he sits beside his daughter and holds her hand without telling her to stop crying. She feels safer than she has in months. Not because of anything said, but because nothing was rushed. In a coastal town where storms steal more than sleep, Liz stays through the season. She helps rebuild the dock, plants herbs where the wind broke the earth, folds cloths with the children who call them sea leaves. One boy gives her a fold with a line that reads, "My brother left and never came back, but I still talk to him at night." She doesn't answer, just folds it again and holds it to her chest for a moment. The next day the boy finds her cloth beside his pillow. It says some voices live longer in silence than in sound. He doesn't cry. He just carries it with him, tucked into his sleeve like a breath he might need later. Word spreads not like fire, but like warmth, slowly, through hands, through breath. Cloths begin appearing in places Liz has never been. A monk folds prayers into scraps of dyed wool. A teacher leaves stitched blessings inside exam books. A baker hides tiny folded squares and loaves on market day, each one with a kindness inside. None of them know the others, but they all feel connected, not by rule, not by creed, by rhythm. A shared sense that someone somewhere once chose to stay, and now it's their turn. And in every town where a cloth is placed, something changes. People speak softer, wait longer, see each other. Liz grows older. Her hands are still steady, but her legs tire more easily. She walks with a staff now, oak, wrapped in linen at the grip. A folded cloth is tied just beneath the handle, one from her early days with Callan. It reads, "You don't have to hold everything alone." She touches it sometimes when the road feels too long, and when strangers ask what it is, she smiles. A promise I keep making. In one village, someone offers her a home. She thanks them, stays for a time, then leaves before the offer turns into expectation. She always moves on gently. Her presence never feels like absence once it's gone, only like something that taught people how to breathe deeper. One night she dreams of Callan, not as he was, but as she remembers him, not in armor, just seated at the edge of the sea, folding a cloth she cannot read. He looks up at her, nods once, says nothing. But in the dream she knows what it means. When she wakes, she finds a blank cloth at her side. She folds it without writing, places it in a hollow tree, and whispers, "Let this become someone else's first." She keeps walking, slower now, but steady, always steady. The fold, after all, is not just in the cloth. It's in the way she moves, the way she pauses, the way she listens. And wherever she goes, the world becomes just a little more ready to hold something gently. Liz reaches a crossroads she doesn't recognize. Not from maps, not from memory. The path to the left winds through fields golden with grain. The right, into hills wrapped in mist. She doesn't decide quickly. She sits beneath a tree for the afternoon, folds a cloth, and waits for silence to answer. That night she dreams again. Not of Kaelin this time, but of the first cloth she ever folded. She can still remember the stitch, still feel how clumsy her fingers were, and in the dream, she unfolds it. Inside begin again, she wakes smiling, takes the path into the mist, not because it's clearer, but because it feels like the quieter invitation. The hills are steep, fewer people live here, the villages are smaller, the silence is longer. She stays in a town with no name on the sign. The people are kind but cautious, their lives worn thin by loss. A fire years ago, a sickness after. They've learned to live with tight voices, with quiet eyes. Liz doesn't push them. She just tends to the garden outside the inn, sweeps the chapel floor, folds a cloth each evening and leaves it on the steps. At first, no one touches them. Then one disappears. Then another. One morning she finds a folded cloth waiting for her in return. No words, just the fold. She holds it longer than she expected. The children begin folding first. They use scraps of linen, old letters, bark peeled soft by rain. They ask questions without asking. They bring her pieces to read, not aloud, just with her hands. One says, "I think I miss someone I never met." Another, "My mother says we can't afford to cry anymore." She folds one for them in return. We do not need to understand something to be allowed to feel it. The children leave it pinned to the door of the schoolhouse. By the week's end, it has been copied 6 times. No one says who did it. No one needs to. A teacher in the village begins writing again. Just small lines. Stories from before the fire. Notes to students who struggle. Words she used to be afraid would come out wrong. She gives one to Liz before she leaves. Folded into a shape Liz has never seen. "It's from my grandmother's people," the teacher says. She used to say folding is a way of holding without gripping. Liz unfolds it later. "Inside, you help me make room again." She doesn't keep it. She ties it to a tree just beyond the village path. She knows someone else will find it, and when they do, it will say what it needs to. She doesn't have to know who. The fold will carry the message. As she walks, she begins to hum more often. Not songs, just breath given shape. She leaves fewer cloths now, but each one holds more space. One is left on a mountaintop caught beneath a smooth stone. It reads, "You can rest here, even if it's not the end." Another is folded into the hollow of a traveling merchant's bag. It says, "You are not too much." That one makes it across 4 regions before someone finally opens it during a storm and weeps into it. They carry it with them until it falls apart, threadbare from use. Still, they keep it, because even broken, it reminds them someone once folded this with care. That was enough. Liz comes to a village where no one smiles. Not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. The harvest was thin. The well runs dry every 3rd month. People speak in short phrases, eyes low. She doesn't try to cheer them. She simply stays, helps mend a broken fence, folds a cloth and places it at the hearth of the inn, where she's given a bed. No words, just a blue thread, spiraled gently into the corner. It's still there in the morning. The day after, it's gone. No one says a thing. But when she returns from the field that evening, she finds a folded cloth left for her in return, simple and wrinkled, made from an old curtain. Inside, one line, "You reminded me that I could still give something." She begins to leave behind fewer explanations, fewer written words. Instead, she lets the cloth carry its own kind of knowing. In one mountain village, she folds a cloth for a midwife who never speaks, only works. She tucks it under the woman's chair. The next morning, the woman nods to her for the first time, then places a folded cloth in return. Inside, "I never knew silence could mean someone saw me." That cloth is never read aloud. But days later, the midwife begins teaching young girls how to fold during long births, saying, "It steadies the breath. It spreads from there, quietly." The cloths begin showing up in homes before storms, under pillows before hard decisions, in aprons and pockets and between pages of worn books. Liz receives a letter by hand one morning. Delivered by a traveler who doesn't know the sender. The paper is creased. Inside only I left a cloth in the city, tied to the gate. Days later it was gone, but I think it helped someone. I think they needed it. I never told anyone it was mine. It's the best thing I've done in years. Liz folds the letter gently. No reply needed, but she places it beneath a stone beside her bed, and the next time she folds, her hands move slower, more deliberately. She doesn't stitch anything. She just breathes into the cloth before placing it near a well that hasn't given water in 3 days. That night, rain comes. No one credits her, but a child ties a dry cloth to the well post. The next morning and writes, "Thank you for not giving up when it was dry." She returns once more to the place where she first met Kalen's memory. The sea, the tree, the old stone bench. The branches are thicker now. New carvings have appeared. Some careful, some rushed, all sincere. Someone has built a small shelter nearby. Not large, just enough for resting travelers. Inside it, Lise finds a chest. Not Kalen's, but similar. Someone has been folding here too. Dozens of cloths, all blank. One, though, has a phrase stitched in unfamiliar thread. The one who came before left something I didn't know I needed. I don't know who they were, but I hope I make them proud. Lise sits with it a long time, then adds a cloth of her own. Her last one here. You have. She doesn't stay the night. Just watches the horizon until the stars arrive. Quiet and wide, then walks inland, toward no particular place. Her steps slower, her heart full. In one hand she carries a blank cloth, not yet folded. In the other, a memory she will never write down because it's not meant to be shared, just held. And behind her in the soft, dark air, a wind stirs through the trees, lifting the edge of a single cloth, tied gently to a low branch. It doesn't open. It doesn't need to. The message is already in the air. We are still folding, still here, still listening. Lys grows older. Her steps become smaller, her pauses longer, but her presence is as full as ever. She walks with her staff, now wrapped with bits of folded cloth. Others have given her, some are fraying, some still carry scent. Lavender, smoke, rain. Each one is a story she never had to write down. One morning she comes to a crossroads where an old woman is weeping quietly. No words, just grief. Lys doesn't speak. She sits beside her, waits. The wind moves through the trees like someone shushing the world. Finally the woman says, "No one waited for me." Lys reaches into her satchel, hands her a cloth, folded 3 times. Inside just I did, I am. The woman holds it like something she forgot she needed, says thank you with her whole body. Lys stops folding every day. Not because she's forgotten, because she no longer needs to prove she remembers. Now, when she folds, it's only when the moment asks, a cry in the market, a farewell no one can speak, a hand that won't stop shaking. She folds like breathing now. No effort, no strain, just response. One boy asks her, "Why don't you write anything on some of them?" She smiles. Because silence is already holding something. He doesn't get it. But weeks later he starts folding too. And one day after a long walk he hands someone a blank cloth when words fail. It helps. He still doesn't know why, but it does. In a library filled with dust and forgotten shelves, someone finds a folded cloth tucked into a book of war records. No name, no date, just one stitched line. I chose not to swing the blade that day, and I still think that was the braver act. The reader places the cloth in their pocket. They don't tell anyone. But later that month, they stop shouting during meetings. They begin letting others speak first. They fold their own cloth, unsure of what to write. So they write nothing, but they carry it. And eventually they understand this isn't about grand choices. It's about staying gentle when the world says be sharp. Lys begins to dream differently now. The places in her sleep are not ones she's walked, but places the fold has reached. A classroom where every child begins the day. Folding in silence. A crowded train where someone passes cloths to strangers without making eye contact. A room where someone is dying, and a folded cloth sits on the nightstand, not to save, not to fix, just to keep company. She wakes from each dream with her heart slow, steady, not longing to go there, just grateful it exists. And sometimes she wonders if Kalen dreamed this way too. If his story, like hers, never really ended, just branched, like rivers, into the world without needing permission. One day she reaches a hill that overlooks a quiet valley. It's late in the year. The wind carries a hint of cold, but the ground is still soft. She sits beneath a tree with roots like resting arms. She closes her eyes, and she folds one final cloth. Slowly, without rush. Her hands remember the rhythm. Her breath keeps time. She does not write a message. She simply places the cloth beside her, palm resting gently on top. She stays like that for a long while, until the sun sets, until the wind stills, until the sky grows heavy with stars, and the cloth held by her hand in the earth waits not for a reader but for someone ready to begin again. Liz is no longer seen in the villages. Her path simply faded into the trees, into the quiet, into the folds she left behind. But her presence, like Kalen's before her, remains. In the way people speak a little slower in the mornings. In how children in a hill town know how to tie cloth with calm hands before they learn to ride. In the baker who keeps one cloth always folded beside the register, stitched with "You're doing better than you think." She never speaks of where it came from. She only glances at it when her hands begin to shake. And that glance steadies her. A young woman named Ellen finds a cloth in a market stall, folded inside a basket of onions. It's creased with time, but the stitch is fresh. It says, "Not everything that grows leaves a mark you can see." She doesn't know what it means. Not at first, but she places it inside her apron pocket and begins to notice the world differently. A neighbor who always looks away when spoken to, a child who draws at the edge of the crowd, an old man who fixes shoes without ever charging enough. Ellen begins folding, not perfectly, not quickly, but with care. She leaves her first cloth beneath a cracked bench. Someone takes it, leaves a pebble in its place. Ellen doesn't seek out instruction. She follows the folds. Each one feels like a map, not of geography but of heart. One leads her to a town still aching from a loss they cannot speak aloud. She says nothing when she arrives, just listens, helps where she can, leaves a cloth beneath a tree. It says some pain is not meant to be named, only shared. The next morning she finds someone has left a folded ribbon on her doorstep. It smells faintly of rosemary. No words, just a gesture. She ties it to her pack and walks on. It flutters as she moves. A new kind of banner, soft, unclaimed, true. In another place, someone folds books instead of cloth, dog-eared corners. Messages scribbled in margins. They say, "It's the same spirit, just different material." Ellen visits their little shop and finds a whole shelf of pages marked with tenderness. One reads, "You don't need to be useful to be worth keeping." Another, "Fold the page where you found yourself again." She smiles, leaves a cloth on the counter before leaving. Days later, someone finds it tucked into a poetry collection, stitched with a single line. "This is the part where you breathe." They take it home without a word and sleep with it under their pillow. The fold continues, not as a movement, not as a tradition, as breath, as instinct. A slow return to something the world forgot it knew, how to hold without clutching, how to speak through presence, how to be remembered through what we leave behind, not in name but in feeling. And every now and then someone, maybe Ellen, maybe someone she's helped, comes across an old cloth, folded tight, weathered by years. They unfold it with careful fingers. And inside, you're part of this now. No date, no signature, just the thread of care, still intact, still holding, still here. Hélène begins to notice that she is no longer the only one folding in the villages she visits. In one town, the innkeeper leaves a cloth on every guest's bed, folded into the shape of a bird. No messages, just form. In another, a stable hand ties a scrap of linen to each horse's reins before a long journey. She says, "They carry weight too." Hélène doesn't speak of the fold like a lesson. She lets it be noticed, felt, passed. In one bakery, she sees a row of cloths strung like prayer flags across the wall. One reads, "We softened before we broke." That counts as strength. She lingers there longer than usual, orders a second loaf, leaves a cloth on the empty plate before she goes. The folds change as they travel, some stitched in thread, others drawn in ink, some made of paper, others of pressed leaves. But they carry the same stillness. In a cold mountain village, Hélène sees children folding bits of bark and slipping them into the cracks of stone walls. When asked why, one says, "So the wind remembers not to howl so loud." She kneels and helps him fold another. They place it together between two stones. Later that night, snow falls softly, and no one is kept awake. It isn't magic, it's memory. Something the world holds gently because someone once showed it how. One evening, she finds a cloth beneath her own pillow. She didn't place it there. Someone has folded it carefully, stitched only a single spiral. No message. But she feels something settle in her chest when she touches it. She carries it with her the next day, keeps it near. Later, she leaves it on a fence post in a quiet place where the trees lean close, as if listening. She doesn't need to keep it. It has already done what it came to do. The next traveler will find it, or the wind will carry it further. Either way, it continues, and she lighter now does too. In a place where conflict once scorched the land, Hélène helps rebuild a roof. She isn't a carpenter, but her hands are steady. The workers don't speak much. They're tired, suspicious, but she listens. Sits with them at meals, leaves folded cloths beside the toolboxes. One says, "You don't have to be ready, you only have to be here." Another, "This place still wants to heal." A man picks it up, folds it again. Later, he carves the message into the beam above the hearth. Not for decoration, for anchoring. Months later, others add their own messages beside it. The beams become a library of quiet truths, written by those who stayed when they could have fled. Hélène no longer asks herself whether she is doing enough. She folds when it's time, waits when it's not. Her bag is lighter now, not because she carries less, but because she understands more clearly what needs to be kept. She holds a small bundle of older cloths, ones that came before her. She's begun sewing them together, side by side, not as a banner, but as a resting cloth, a place to lay down the day. She tells no one about it, but when someone weeps in her presence, she unfolds it, lays it across their lap, and says, "You don't have to speak yet." Most of them don't. But all of them stay longer than they thought they would, because the fold is not just in the fabric, it's in the way she stays. Hélène spends a season in a town built along the edge of a quiet river. The stones are smooth, the days pass slowly, the people speak in low voices, often finishing each other's thoughts. They've endured much here, a flood, a famine, then silence that grew between neighbors like ivy between bricks. She doesn't ask what happened, she just offers what's needed. Repairs a bench, weeds a garden, folds a cloth each morning and leaves it near the water's edge. The river never answers, but each morning the cloth is gone, and in its place a stone, polished, dry. She begins to understand the river listens too. One evening, an old man joins her by the shore. He carries a folded cloth, years old by the look of it. "I never opened this," he says. "Didn't think I was allowed?" Hélène nods. "You can now, or not. The fold doesn't expire." He laughs, then opens it slowly, with both hands. Inside, what you felt was real. You didn't imagine being left. He weeps, not loud, just enough. He folds it again with trembling fingers. I think I'll keep it now. She doesn't answer. She places a new cloth beside his. That night they sit in silence while the river keeps time. She begins to notice a pattern in the way people leave cloths for each other, not in the messages, but in the moments. A cloth is folded most often after someone listens, after someone stays through the silence that comes after truth is spoken. Hélène watches this unfold in real time. A mother folding for her son after years of silence. A shopkeeper folding for a customer who couldn't make up her mind. A farmer folding one and leaving it on the gate of someone he once shouted at. The cloths don't erase the past, but they soften its grip, like laying down a blade that was never meant to be held so tightly for so long. One night, Hélène wakes from a dream, a figure wrapped in light, not speaking, just folding. Their hands are familiar, strong, patient. And when they lift their head, she doesn't recognize their face, but she feels a peace settle in her like snow on a still roof. The next day, she finds a fold placed on her pack. No one saw who left it. Inside, you are not the end of this. You are a bridge. She holds it for a long time, then tucks it between the pages of her journal. She begins to write more after that, not about herself, about others. Stories she's heard while listening, lines people whispered when they thought no one was paying attention. And she starts teaching, not by declaring it, just by doing it openly. In the square, in the shade of a tree, on the steps of the bakery. Children join her first, then others. Soon folding becomes part of the rhythm of the town, a quiet act like sweeping or planting, not sacred, not rare, just natural. And one morning she wakes to find dozens of cloths strung across the river like a bridge of soft breath, none of them signed, but every one of them folded with the kind of gentleness only learned by staying. She walks across them slowly, with her eyes closed, trusting the fold, trusting the way forward is made not by pushing, but by pausing. Hélène leaves the riverside village without fanfare, just before dawn, before the baker stirs, before the children run through the square. She ties one cloth to a branch near the path. It reads, "You taught each other how to stay." Then she walks, not with urgency, just direction. There's no destination, only a sense, something waiting to be witnessed. Her feet find a road where the wind carries stories, not sounds. She listens, not with her ears, with her breath. Each step feels like a question asked slowly. Who still needs space to unfold? And the road answers by opening to her. She reaches a town split by a long, cracked wall, not a fortress, just a boundary that outlived the reason it was built. The people live on either side but don't speak. No anger, just habit. Hélène stays in the space between. She sweeps the middle street, buys from both markets, leaves folded cloths where children can find them. It's safe to reach again. What you miss might miss you too. Slowly the cracks in the wall are filled, not with mortar but with messages. Pieces of cloth placed where the stone has worn away. A child draws a smile on one. A widow ties her wedding ribbon through another. No one announces the change, but it happens anyway. The first time someone from one side crosses to the other, it's to return a lost cat. No one cheers, but someone folds a cloth afterward and places it on a doorstep. It felt good to be kind again. That evening, Hélène folds one herself, tucks it beneath a stone. It says, "Sometimes it only takes one thread to begin the mend." She walks on. The wall remains. But now it hums, not with warning, but with witness. Not with defense, but with memory, and the silence that once separated now holds something different. Readiness. Hélène finds herself in a city next, loud, layered, moving faster than thought. At first, she feels small, unfolded, forgotten, but she doesn't rush. She finds the quiet places between buildings, beneath bridges, on rooftops where pigeons gather without complaint. She folds cloths from paper scraps, from fallen garments. She leaves them in bookshops, in waiting rooms, on tram seats, each with only one thought: you don't need to earn rest. Someone already sees the strength in your softness. It's okay to not know yet. Some are taken, some aren't. But the city feels a little different as she walks it, as if it's listening again. A girl finds one of Ellen's folds on a rainy evening, tucked into the spine of a park bench. She doesn't open it right away. She holds it, walks with it, sleeps with it under her hand. When she finally unfolds it, it says, "The story you don't know how to tell yet still matters." She reads it twice, then folds it again, carries it for weeks, then leaves it somewhere else. The message doesn't change, but the person who reads it next feels like it was written just for them. And Ellen, sitting 3 streets away, folding in silence beside a steam cart, doesn't know where that cloth will go, only that the fold has moved again, as it always does. Ellen moves through the city like a breath, between sentences. She doesn't try to change it, she just folds. At a bakery counter, she tucks a cloth beneath the coins. "You deserve more than survival." The baker finds it later and pins it to the wall above the sourdough starter. Customers begin to ask about it, so she makes more. Not for business, just for balance. One man reads one and doesn't cry until he gets home. It said, "Even if no one saw how hard you tried, this counts." The next day he returns and leaves a folded square of linen in the tip jar. No note, just the shape. The baker understands. She keeps it beside her heart. On a train platform, Ellen folds slowly on a bench. People pass her like wind around stone. Someone finally stops, asks, "Why do you keep folding even if no one notices?" She replies, "The cloth remembers even if no one else does." The man nods. That night he folds his first one, writes a line his mother used to whisper when he was afraid. "I'll sit here until the dark becomes less heavy." He doesn't know where to leave it, so he keeps it in his wallet. Weeks later, he gives it to a co-worker who didn't show up for 3 days. Doesn't say anything, just hands it over. They nod and keep it. Ellen watches from the edges. That's always where the folds begin, at the margins. On the periphery, near those who've grown used to waiting. At a hospital gate, she leaves a cloth for someone she doesn't know. The guards never see her place it, but a woman finds it. She's just lost someone. She opens it in the parking lot and finds the pain is not proof that you failed. It's proof that you loved. She folds it again, holds it against her chest. A nurse sees her crying and comes to sit beside her. They don't speak, but the fold does something. Neither of them will forget it. One evening, Ellen stays in a boarding house above a bookstore. She spends the night folding and reading, folding and resting. The books don't speak loudly anymore. They just breathe beside her. She slips cloths into 5 volumes, one into a worn book of poetry. You still have time to become gentler. One in a forgotten cookbook. Feed others when you can. Feed yourself even when you can't. One between the pages of a notebook someone left behind. You're allowed to start again from the middle. She doesn't leave a name. She just checks out quietly. But a week later, the clerk begins leaving cloths too. Blank ones. For whoever needs to speak, he says. The folds don't follow her anymore. They walk beside her, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. She sees them now in doorways pinned to windows, held in hands she doesn't recognize. One cloth has traveled more than she has. Its corners worn, its message barely legible. You are still worth showing up for. She recognizes her own stitching, but it's no longer hers. That's the miracle. It belongs to the one who carries it now. And that's all the proof she needs that what she's doing, what started long before her, was never about being remembered. It was about helping others remember themselves. Ellen finds herself in a village tucked between 2 ridges, where fog lingers like a memory and the streets echo longer than expected. It's a quiet place, not unfriendly, just used to keeping things small, manageable, folded in. She stays in a room above a blacksmith's shop, helps sweep, fetch coal, carry water. She folds slowly, not wanting to rush the rhythm here. The first cloth she leaves says nothing. It rests on the bench outside the chapel. Someone takes it the next day. No one speaks of it. But 2 mornings later, a folded cloth appears on the same bench. Inside, I thought I was the only one still trying to be kind. Hélène holds it like a prayer, then folds it again and lets it stay. The blacksmith, a woman with broad shoulders and quiet eyes, notices Hélène's hands one day. "You fold like someone who's mended more than fabric," she says. Hélène just smiles. That evening, the blacksmith leaves a cloth on the windowsill of the forge. It reads, "I kept going after everyone stopped asking if I was okay." Hélène doesn't reply. She just begins folding beside her in the evenings. They sit in silence, pressing fabric into shapes that hold more than conversation could. Wordless companionship. The blacksmith begins placing cloths inside the tool chests of traveling journeymen. One day, a note returns. "Your cloth made the weight easier to carry." She pins it near the anvil, never says a word. Hélène starts teaching again, but gently, just a question now and then. "What would you say to someone if you didn't have to explain it?" she asks a child with ink-stained fingers. The child thinks for a long time, then folds a cloth and writes, "I'm scared most days, but I'm still showing up." She doesn't hand it to anyone. She tucks it in the roots of the oldest tree in the village. By spring, that tree holds a dozen cloths, some new, some worn, all tied loosely to its branches like lanterns waiting for night. The townspeople begin walking slower when they pass it. Some bow, some pause to breathe. None of them know exactly why it helps, but it does. At the village edge, an old woman who hasn't spoken since her son died begins folding paper. Not fabric, just bits of old letters, cut carefully, shaped gently. She places them in the postbox with no stamps. One is found months later in a bakery tucked into a bag of flour. It reads, "I haven't forgotten your laughter. It still echoes in quiet kitchens." The baker keeps it, folds one of her own, and the next bag she delivers to the innkeeper has something tucked into it. The innkeeper cries quietly when she reads, "Even grief softens when held together." The paper is thin, the ink runs, but the feeling stays, long after it's folded again and placed under a pillow. Hélène leaves the village without saying goodbye. She never really does. Her work is not in being seen. It's in making sure others see themselves. She folds a final cloth and places it on the chapel bench again. Inside, you don't need a new beginning to keep going, just a pause, and the courage to take the next quiet step. The blacksmith finds it, smiles, folds it again, keeps it in the pocket of her leather apron. And long after Hélène is gone, when others pass through, the village tells them not about her name, but about the tree, about the cloths, about how things began to feel lighter after a stranger came and showed them how to fold what was too heavy to carry alone. Hélène follows the road south, where the air grows warmer and the wind smells of citrus and dust. She stops less often now, not because she is restless, but because she is more careful about when to stay. Not every place needs her. Not every silence calls for her presence. But when it does, she knows. It's not in the words. It's in the way a town holds its breath without meaning to. She feels it in her bones like a shift in the sky. One such place meets her near the coast. A town with wide streets and closed windows, where even the fountains seem to hesitate. She stays. There is a square where no one lingers. She sits there in the mornings, folding, watching, breathing. The first cloth she leaves is pinned to a tree. The space you avoid still remembers you. It's waiting with patience. No one touches it for days. Then one morning it's gone. In its place, a folded strip of red wool. No message, but a kind of presence, like a heartbeat. Hélène folds beside it, doesn't look for thanks. She's learned not to measure impact in moments. The fold lives in what people do after. A potter speaks to her one evening while she's folding in the square. He says, "The town's been quiet since the loss. We don't say it. We just know it." She nods. Doesn't press. He gives her a broken shard, glazed blue. It was part of something. Maybe it still is. She folds a cloth and wraps it around the shard, leaves it in the center of the square. The next day, someone places a second shard beside it, then a third. In a week, the townspeople have left dozens, all different, all broken, all wrapped. The mayor says, "We're not fixing anything, just admitting it happened. That's enough." Sometimes that's everything. Aylin sees someone folding in the market. A woman in her 60s, wrapping fish in cloth that holds messages, not visible, just folded into the corners. When asked why, she says, "People take more care when they think someone's speaking to them." One fold reads, "Your hands are doing holy work, even when they tremble." A man unwraps it at home and weeps into the cloth. He places it on his table and eats beside it in silence. Later, he begins folding napkins for guests. One guest leaves his with a note stitched in the edge. "I stayed longer than I planned. Thank you for making space." The table becomes a place where silence doesn't feel like absence anymore. When Ellen finally leaves, the town holds no ceremony, just cloths tied to doors. Windows left slightly open, a potter's wheel turning again. The market hums. Not loud, but open. She folds a cloth with no words, tucks it under a stone by the fountain. As she walks out of town, a child runs past her in the opposite direction, hands full of fabric, eyes steady, breath even. She smiles. Doesn't stop her. She knows the rhythm. That child will fold. Maybe soon. Maybe years from now. But the thread has passed again. Not pulled. Just placed. And the fold, as always, carries on. Aylin walks further inland, where the land flattens and the wind doesn't sing. It simply stays. The towns here are simpler. Fewer names on signs, fewer stories told out loud. But she feels something in the silence. Not emptiness, just waiting. In one town, she finds an inn with no sign, just a small red thread tied to the door. When she enters, no one speaks, but someone has already placed a folded cloth on her table, inside. If you've come to rest, you're welcome. If you've come to stay, you already have. She folds her own and leaves it tucked into the edge of the window. It says nothing. The silence between them holds enough. She spends days there without marking them. Time feels slower in places like this, as if the land itself refuses to hurry. People come and go. Some speak, some don't. Most leave a cloth behind. Some with thoughts. "I was afraid I forgot how to be kind. I didn't know I needed to be seen so quietly." Others just fold and walk away. The innkeeper keeps them all in a wooden box near the hearth. It's never locked. Anyone can read. Anyone can add. Ellen spends one whole afternoon just unfolding them, then folding them again. She doesn't speak once. That night, her sleep is deeper than it's been in weeks. In the nearby fields, farmers begin tying cloths to the fence posts. Not for protection, for presence. They stitch weather notes, thoughts for the next season, memories of what was lost last harvest. It becomes a rhythm. Tie one before dawn, read one before supper. Ellen walks past one that reads, "I was going to give up, but then someone sat with me for 7 minutes without speaking, and I didn't need to anymore." She doesn't take it, but she touches it with her fingers gently, as if to say, "I heard," then folds one and places it just below. You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving. A day later, it's gone. The thread continues. She visits a school where folding has become part of the morning. Not mandatory, just there. Each child starts their day with a small square of cloth. Some fold it immediately, some hold it for hours. One child never folds hers at all, just keeps it in her pocket. Aylin asks the teacher why. The teacher shrugs. Some things are comforting just by being close. Later, Aylin sees that girl whispering into the cloth before putting it back. The cloth, though never shaped, begins to fray at the edges from so much carrying, and Aylin knows it's working. Even unspoken, even unread, Care leaves an impression. She begins to feel the journey returning to itself, not ending, just circling, like breath, like seasons, like story. She folds less often now, but each one means more. She speaks less, but every silence she offers seems to stretch wider, hold deeper. One evening, she finds a cloth tied to a tree in a place she's never visited. It reads, "I followed the folds back to myself." The thread is familiar, not hers, but something that carries the same stillness. She sits beneath that tree until morning, folding nothing, doing nothing, just resting in the knowledge that what once began in armor now lives in gentleness, and the world somehow remembers how to receive it. The road bends toward a small, nameless village with a single bridge and no signs. Elin arrives just before dusk. She sees folded cloths tucked into the sides of the bridge like offerings, each one fluttering slightly in the wind. No messages visible, only the folds themselves. Some frayed, some tight, some faded. She doesn't touch them. She walks across slowly, placing her feet carefully between the cloths, as if each step were part of a conversation she's not meant to interrupt. Halfway across, she finds a stone with a cloth laid over it. She lifts the edge. Inside it reads, "It mattered that you came." She folds it again with slow fingers and nods to the air. She stays in a cottage owned by no one. The townsfolk tend it like a shared secret, clean, stocked, silent. There's a fire already built in the hearth when she arrives, and a basket of folded cloths near the door. She doesn't write. She doesn't fold. She just rests. For 3 days she says almost nothing. No one visits. And yet each morning she finds something new, a cup of tea left steaming on the step, a folded shawl draped gently over the rail, a cloth hung above the threshold with a simple knot. Not messages, just presences. The way the fold always begins. Quiet, careful, kind. On the 4th day she finds a young man sitting on the bridge. He's holding a folded cloth in his lap but hasn't opened it. She sits beside him without asking. After a long silence he says, "I've carried this for a year. I thought I had to be ready before I read it." She nods. He opens it. Inside, "Read this when you finally believe you're still worth the space you take up." His hands begin to shake. He doesn't cry, he just breathes. And she breathes with him. Later he folds it again and ties it to the bridge where others can see it. "Someone else might need it first," he says. And she knows he's already begun folding without needing to be taught. That evening, a storm arrives, soft and steady. Rain taps the roof like a slow drum. Elin lights a candle and folds a cloth for the first time in days. Her hands move without thought. She doesn't plan the words, she just lets them appear. When she finishes, it reads, "I stayed longer than I planned, and somehow that's exactly what I needed." She places it beneath the tea basket. The next day, it's gone. In its place, a note stitched with coarse thread. "Then stay again, or go, but carry the quiet with you." She ties it to her staff and continues walking, not because she's finished, but because something else is beginning. She doesn't look for the next town. The fold will find her. It always does. In a face that flinches before kindness, in hands that hover but do not reach, in voices that lower just before saying the thing that's heaviest. That's where the fold belongs now. Not in cloth alone, but in the space between fear and tenderness, between survival and rest, between "I don't know how" and "I'll try anyway." And Elin, walking now with slower steps and steadier breath, understands the path is not made by walking forward. It's made by pausing long enough that others feel safe to follow. Elin walks into a stretch of land with no clear path, only wind-worn stones and tall grass that shifts like a sleeping sea. There are no towns for miles, but she isn't alone. The fold is with her, in the weight of her satchel, in the rhythm of her stride, in the softness she now carries like an invisible cloak. At night she lights a fire and places one folded cloth beside it, not to send a message, but as a companion. It doesn't need words, just shape, just stillness. She sleeps well beneath the stars, wrapped not in armor or story, but in the quiet dignity of having stayed kind when it would have been easier not to. At the edge of a forest, she meets a woman named Oren, who lives in a cabin filled with half-finished maps and dried herbs. Oren speaks in slow syllables and offers Hélène a place to stay without asking anything in return. Hélène helps mend a roof tile. Oren gives her a piece of cloth, blank, finely woven, soft as memory. Fold it when the moment asks, she says. Hélène tucks it away. Days pass. They fold together in the evenings. Not always writing, not always sharing, just folding. One night, Oren speaks. I used to think I had to speak loudly to matter, but your silence, it steadies the room. Hélène folds one cloth and slides it across the table. You are felt more than you know. Oren closes her eyes, breathes, folds one in return. Before Hélène leaves, they place their folds in the hollow of an old cedar tree. It holds dozens from others who've passed through, some ancient, some fresh. A shared archive rooted and wordless. Oren adds one more, stitched in blue. Some visitors plant peace without touching the ground. Hélène touches the bark, says nothing, walks on. As she goes, she ties one of her oldest cloths to a low branch beside the path. It's blank but creased from years of carrying. Whoever finds it will feel the shape of every place it's ever been, and they'll know something kind passed through here. She enters a village where cloths are not just folded but worn. People stitch them into cloaks, wrap them into belts, weave them into hair. The fold has become a language here, unspoken, seen, understood. No two folds mean the same thing. One woman wears 7, layered in her shawl. Another man ties one to his cane. A child wears one like a crown. Ellen watches quietly. She doesn't add her own at first. She just listens. The folds tell her everything she needs to know. Who's mourning, who's mending, who's remembering how to soften. She folds only once. A single small piece, tucked into the cracks of a stone wall. You've turned remembering into something gentle. The villagers hold a quiet gathering every 7th night. Not a ritual, not a show, just a sharing. They sit in a wide circle, pass folded cloths without reading them aloud. Some unfold, some don't. A fire burns low in the center. Hélène joins the circle and offers nothing her first time. The second, she passes a cloth with no stitch, only the scent of cedar. It's held, folded, again, passed. When it returns to her, someone's added a single word. Still, she presses it to her heart. That night, she doesn't fold anything. She simply sleeps with open palms. And the world around her feels like it's breathing with her, gently, evenly, as if to say, you've given enough for now. Hélène wakes before the others in the village, before the sun has warmed the rooftops. The air is still, holding its breath in that space between dark and day. She walks the empty streets, the cloth from the gathering still tucked into her sleeve. It says still, and it feels like a compass, though it points nowhere in particular. She doesn't need direction, only trust. She finds the wide stone wall where she left her last message. There are new folds now, bright ones, careful ones, clumsy ones. One stitched in gold says, "We forgot how to name joy, but we remembered how to hold it." She smiles without touching it, just lets the feeling land. She leaves the village without telling anyone. No ceremony, no farewell. That's always been the way of it. She folds a cloth and places it on the bench outside the weaving shop. You'll know when it's time to pass it on. Someone will find it. Someone always does. The fold doesn't call for applause, only continuity. She walks with her satchel a little lighter now, her staff worn smooth by time and touch. The path ahead is quiet. That's what draws her. The next story is somewhere just behind silence. She reaches a wide field where the wind moves like breath, rising and falling. There's a small home at its edge. with a garden and a single chair facing west. A young man lives there tending to his mother, who no longer speaks. He folds paper birds in the evenings. Hélène offers to help with the garden. He accepts. They work without many words. She watches him fold one bird with a message tucked beneath the wing. When he catches her looking, he says, "She likes to hold them, even if she doesn't read them." Hélène replies, "Sometimes holding is all we need." That night, she folds a cloth and places it in the empty chair beside the old woman. Your silence still holds weight. In the morning, the cloth is gone, but the birds multiply. The young man folds slower after that, more intentionally. He begins tying the birds into the branches of the trees near the house, not high, just enough for passers-by to see. One day, a traveler stops and unfolds one. It's not too late to be gentle again. He doesn't say anything, but he places a folded square of his own beneath the tree and walks on. The man watches, then turns to Ellen. "Do you think she would have liked what this has become?" She doesn't answer directly, just folds one more cloth and hands it to him. "Inside, you've made something that helps the wind remember how to be kind." He reads it, then places it in the garden soil. Hélène stays a little longer than she planned. Not because she's needed, because she wants to. The house holds a quiet that steadies her bones. At night, she folds next to the fire. Not for anyone specific, just to keep the shape alive. One cloth she places on the windowsill says, "Rest is not the opposite of purpose." Another, on the old woman's lap, "Your breath is enough." When the time comes to leave, she does it like she always has, gently. Unannounced, she folds a cloth and tucks it into the fold of her blanket before she goes. No message, just warmth, just shape. The man finds it days later and holds it like a thank you spoken without sound. And long after she's gone, the birds still gather in the trees. Hélène follows a road she doesn't recognize, though something about the trees feels familiar. The way they lean inward. The way the breeze carries like a whisper just above thought. She isn't tired, but she walks more slowly now. Not from age, from attention. Each step becomes a kind of listening, a way to notice what others might miss. A fallen ribbon tied to a fence, a bundle of dried herbs hanging from a tree, a folded cloth placed on a rock near a crossroads. She doesn't open it. She doesn't need to. She places her hand gently over it and leaves her own cloth beside it. One breath, shared without speaking. She enters a village that once built walls, though now they stand only halfway, overgrown with ivy, split by time. No one talks about the walls anymore, but Hélène notices how the people walk, how they avoid the gaps, how they laugh but not too loud. She doesn't ask. She just begins folding. At the well, near the bakery, by the schoolhouse door, the first one reads, "You are allowed to feel safe now." A boy finds it, doesn't read it at first, just keeps it in his pocket for a week. When he finally opens it, he shows his sister. She folds her own the next day. The walls don't have to stay. The villagers begin folding with her, slowly, hesitantly. Not as a movement, just as a kindness. A woman ties one to her shop window. "I want to trust my neighbors again." A farmer places one in the dirt beneath a stubborn seed. "Grow when you're ready. We'll wait." A teacher folds cloths with her students each Friday. Some of them don't write anything. Others write too much. It doesn't matter. The cloth holds whatever it's given. One girl stitches, "I was loud because I was afraid no one would hear me." She hangs it in a tree where it catches the light every morning. Hélène sits beneath that tree often, letting the shadows move across her lap like time made visible. One day, a storm arrives. Sudden, relentless. Wind tears at branches. Cloths fly loose. But when it passes, the village doesn't rebuild in silence. They gather, refold what was torn, stitch what frayed. Someone places a bowl in the square and calls it the quiet basket. If you can't say it yet, leave it here. Within days, the basket fills. "I'm still angry. I wish I had said I was sorry. Please come back. No names, no claims, just softness, given form. Hélène doesn't add anything at first. Then one morning she leaves a folded cloth beneath the basket. Even things spoken into emptiness are heard by the heart. She finds it pinned to a doorway the next week, and says nothing. When she leaves the village, they don't call her back. But every home has a cloth near the door now. Some stitched, some drawn, some just folded, waiting. The walls remain half standing. No one pulls them down. No one rebuilds them. They just let them be, as memory, as reminder, as proof that something can be broken and still make space for light. Hélène walks on. Her steps are slow, her satchel lighter, her hands still steady. She carries fewer cloths now, but her very presence folds the space around her, like a hush before healing, like a thread that doesn't need to be seen to keep everything from unraveling. Hélène walks through fields stitched with soft gold, where the wind smells of dusk and distant fires. She doesn't count the days anymore. Time to her is measured in how often people remember to pause. In one village she stops for a night, then stays for a week, not because someone asks, but because no one does. It's the kind of place where people pretend not to be hurting, where everyone greets each other kindly, but never says I'm not okay. She folds her first cloth while sitting beneath the old bell tower. It reads, "There's no shame in needing to be seen." Someone leaves a cup of water beside her as the sun sets. Neither of them speak. It's enough. That village begins folding quietly. A cloth is tied to the fence of the dairy barn. The grief I carry isn't contagious, but the quiet you gave me helped. Another is tucked under the windowsill of the apothecary. Thank you for waiting while I forgot how to smile. The folds don't change everything. The work is still hard. The nights are still long, but the air feels different, like it has room for softness again. Hélène watches from a bench, hands resting in her lap. She doesn't fold every day anymore, but the people do. That's what matters. A child asks her to teach them how to write smaller, so it all fits. She holds their hand, shows them how to let the breath guide the needle. Don't rush the truth, she says. It's already there, you're just letting it rest. The child writes, I miss the person I was before, folds it into a tight square, and buries it beneath a rose bush. Weeks later, the roses bloom brighter than they ever have. The gardener doesn't ask why, he just starts folding too. Hélène leaves behind one cloth when she goes. She places it on the porch of a man who never made eye contact, never said more than a word. She's seen him pause beside folded cloths, but never touch them. Hers says, you don't have to speak to be part of this. He finds it, reads it, keeps it in the front pocket of his coat. No one sees him fold one, but cloths start appearing near his tool shed. One is left for the carpenter. You built more than furniture. You built space for us to stay. Another for the midwife. Your hands caught more than babies. They caught hope. When asked who wrote them, he just shrugs and walks away. Hélène smiles when she hears. She continues walking, sometimes for hours without seeing another soul, sometimes into places where the fold hasn't reached yet, but she carries it with her, in her spine, in her breath, in the way she pauses before speaking, in the way she listens all the way to the end of someone's silence. She doesn't look for where to fold anymore. The folds find her. They move like light, not always direct, but always arriving. And she, once a learner, then a guide, now simply walks like someone who has become the cloth itself. Something soft enough to carry what others can't say. Something strong enough to keep shaping stillness into home. The horizon is low when Ellen comes to the last outpost before the wilderness. Just a circle of homes, a well and a chapel whose doors haven't been opened in months. The people live simply here, as if the world has asked them to speak less and notice more. She doesn't introduce herself. She never has. She offers her hands, hauls water, repairs a broken step, folds one cloth, leaves it beside the chapel door. It's still sacred, even if no one walks through it anymore. The next day the door is open, not wide, just enough for sunlight to slip in. A boy sits beside the well, sketching folded cloths in the dirt with a stick. He doesn't speak. She sits beside him, watches. After a while he hands her a stone. It's not folded, not marked, but she understands. She places a cloth around it, no stitch, no ink, just weight and presence. He smiles, then presses it into the earth like a seed. Weeks later, others begin to do the same. Stones wrapped in cloth appear at the chapel's steps, by the well beneath benches. It becomes their way of saying, I was here, I stayed. Ellen folds slowly, respectfully. She knows she's not building something new. She's tending what already wants to grow. A man from the edge of the village stops her on her way to the orchard. What's the point of all this? He asks. Not unkindly. She folds a cloth while he watches, hands it to him. It reads, some things matter more after we stop needing to explain them. He holds it for a long time, then folds it again tighter. She never sees where he places it, but days later the path to his door is swept clean, and there's a folded cloth hanging from his window like a small flag that says, I'm trying. She doesn't respond, doesn't need to. The fold has already answered. She dreams again, not of people, but of places. Places she's been, now alive with color. Trees draped in cloth, like prayer. A forge where apprentices fold messages into their tools. A market where folded napkins rest on each table like soft shields. She wakes with tears dried on her cheeks, and her fingers curled gently around a fold she doesn't remember making. It says, you are allowed to be tired. She keeps that one, doesn't give it away. Not everything needs to be passed on. Some folds are for holding, for remembering that she too is part of what was made. At the edge of the village, a girl asks to walk with her. She doesn't say why. She just falls in step, carrying her own satchel, slightly worn. Ellen glances once, sees a folded cloth peeking from the flap. Begin when your breath steadies, it says. She doesn't ask who gave it to her. She only says, you'll know where to go when it's time. And the girl nods, walks with her for a few days. Then one morning folds her own cloth, places it beside a stream and says, I think this is where I turn. Ellen hugs her once without speaking. The girl walks into the morning. Ellen watches until the wind takes her silhouette, then folds a cloth and places it in the same place. Go gently. I'll still be folding. Ellen walks through the flatlands where wind sings across the open space like a voice that never needed to shout. She hears the hush in it, the kind that comes after something painful has finally passed, not erased, just acknowledged. She spends a night in a stone hut left open for travelers. There's a folded cloth on the small wooden table inside. No message, just weight, just presence. She leaves one beside it. I'm grateful someone came before me. Then she sleeps with both hands open, as if trusting the night to hold her in return. A few days later, she reaches a gathering place. No buildings, just fire rings and smooth rocks shaped by long-forgotten stories. People pass through often, but they don't stay long. She does. She folds by the fire, and others begin to sit with her. One places a cloth by the flames and says, I haven't felt like myself in years. No one replies, but someone else folds one, leaves it beside his. We still recognize you. Aylin watches as the firelight moves over their hands. The folds become their language. The comfort is not in talking, but in shaping the silence together. Someone brings a song the next night. Not loud, not polished, just breath with shape. They hum while folding. The cloth they leave behind says, my voice has trembled for a long time, but it's still mine. A woman folds and weeps without shame. A child writes nothing, just draws a spiral. Everyone accepts it. The folds do not demand eloquence, only honesty. One man leaves a cloth with, I lost more than I told anyone. It isn't taken, but someone ties it to a nearby branch as if to say, we won't forget, even if you never explain. On the fourth day, Ellen ties a cloth to a tree and sits beside it for hours. It says, some things are not meant to be fixed, only witnessed. She doesn't fold another that day. Her hands rest. Others fold around her. They don't ask for guidance. They've begun to trust their own touch. That night, she notices something different in herself, not distance but clarity, the kind that comes when your offering becomes something others can carry without you. And for the first time in many days, she smiles with both sorrow and joy resting quietly in the same breath. The next morning, a traveler she's never met brings her a folded cloth. This came a long way, he says. She opens it. Inside, the path you made is still being walked. Even where your feet have never touched, it's stitched in a thread she hasn't seen before, deep green, steady. She folds it again, holds it for a moment, then places it in her satchel beside the oldest cloth she still carries. And as the fire burns low and the wind begins its slow hum again, Ellen rises, wraps her cloak around her shoulders, and walks into the soft gold light. Still folding, still walking, still becoming. Ellen walks without urgency. The road is no longer a line. It's a rhythm, pulsing beneath her with a calm certainty. She passes through a grove where the trees bend slightly toward each other, forming a kind of silent cathedral. Folded cloths hang from the branches here. Hundreds of them, some so weathered. They've become part of the bark. She doesn't touch them. She simply walks slowly through the middle. At the far end, someone has built a small bench from driftwood. She sits, folds one cloth, places it beneath the bench. Even if no one sees this, I'll know I stayed long enough to care. The wind rustles nothing. It's already listening. Further down the path, she meets a pair of siblings who travel with a small cart filled with cloths. They call it the still wagon. Every town they enter, they leave 5 folds. One in a doorway, one near a well, one on a gate, one in a child's hand if they're brave enough to offer it, and the 5th, they always leave under a tree. We like giving the earth something to hold too, the younger says. Ellen joins them for a while, not to teach, just to be another pair of hands. She folds beside them one night and adds her 6th, for the ones who are quietly holding everything together. They don't ask where she's going next. They only hug her once, gently, then walk the other way, wagon wheels humming softly behind them. She finds herself beside a lake that reflects the sky so clearly it looks like the world has turned upside down. She doesn't stay in a house. Just under the stars, she folds one cloth, lays it by the shore, and whispers, "Thank you for making room for the sky and the water." The next morning, someone has placed a stone on top of it. A folded cloth rests beside it, marked only with an asterisk. She keeps that one. She's learned what a symbol can hold. Later, she places it in her satchel next to the one that reads still. Her collection is small now, but each one hums with memory. People begin to recognize her, not by name but by breath. "You're the one who doesn't rush," someone says. Another, "You fold, like you're listening to something I can't hear yet." She smiles, doesn't explain. The fold is not about who begins it, or who carries it farthest. It's about what it does to those who feel it, even for a moment. In one town, someone says, "I thought I was the only one trying to be soft in a hard world." She hands them a cloth before they finish speaking. It reads, "You are not alone. You never were." The quiet ones have always been walking with you. They don't speak again, just cry into their hands. She waits with them, not until they're done, just until they remember they don't have to be alone. As she walks beyond that town, the path narrows. The trees return, and with them, a deeper stillness, one that feels like it has been waiting. Her satchel is lighter, her steps slower. The folds come less frequently now, but they go farther. She no longer wonders how many remain. The fold has outlived counting. It has become breath. She walks with her staff, with her silence, with the steadiness of someone who once thought kindness was fragile and now knows it is the only thing that endures. She finds a tree older than memory, places one last cloth at its roots, and sits with it until the sun leans low. No message, just the shape, just the presence. That is enough. Elan wakes to the sound of the wind moving through high branches, as if the trees themselves are exhaling. She doesn't move right away. Her hands rest on her lap, her pack untouched beside her. She's dreamed of water again, still, glass-like, holding the sky in its surface. In the dream, she left a cloth floating there, and it never sank. When she finally stands, she walks barefoot to the edge of a nearby stream, folds one cloth, holds it to her chest, then places it gently in the current. This is not goodbye, just another way to stay. She watches it float until it disappears, not lost, just carried. The woods part slowly as she walks, and the path becomes soft beneath her feet, like it's remembering how to be walked on without being hurt. She stops beside a circle of stones, old and covered in moss. Someone's left cloths here too, not hers, not new. Some so worn they look like bark. She kneels beside them, touches one. It crumbles slightly beneath her fingers, but the care is still there. She places one of her oldest cloths on top. It's blank, has always been blank. That was its gift. She leaves it there, says nothing. The wind curls around the stones like a lullaby. Farther on, she passes through a village where folding is already woven into everything. Cloths in window frames, cloths tied to trees, to pets' collars, to walking sticks. People don't fold out of ritual. They fold as naturally as breathing. A woman teaches her daughter to tie a knot with care. A father pins a fold to the inside of his coat before going to work. A shopkeeper leaves one in a stranger's hand without even looking. Elan doesn't stay long. She doesn't need to. The fold has rooted itself here, and she can feel it growing without her. A child follows her as she leaves, says nothing for hours, then offers her a fold stitched with crooked letters. How do I know when it's my turn? Ellen takes it gently, folds it again, and hands it back. It already is, she says. The child nods, tucks it into their sleeve. And when Ellen finally looks back, hours later, she sees the child sitting at the path's edge, folding something new. The cloth isn't perfect. The lines aren't straight, but it's held with care. That's all it ever needed. The sun begins to lower earlier now. The sky softens at the edges. Ellen feels her steps becoming quieter, her need to speak diminishing further. She folds a cloth only once that day, leaves it near a fallen tree where someone once carved initials. No thread, no ink, just the curve of her hand in the crease. She doesn't stay, she just walks on. Her staff taps the ground with the rhythm of memory, and the silence around her doesn't feel empty. It feels held, as if the world itself is folding gently inward, keeping the shape of everything she's offered, not ending, just resting. Elen walks into a stretch of land where no signs mark the way. The air is cool here but not cold. Trees lean over the path like guardians who remember your name. She doesn't ask where she is. She doesn't wonder where she's going. Her feet move because they're ready. Her hands rest because they've done enough. She carries only one cloth now, folded and unfolded so many times it has become soft as air, thin as time. She touches it sometimes, not to read it, but to remember the shape of what it has held. A clearing opens slowly at the top of a rise. There is no village, no people, just a stone, round and low, as if someone placed it there not to mark an end, but to offer a place to sit. Alan does. The light is golden around her, the kind that touches everything without asking for anything in return. She unfolds her cloth and lays it on her lap. There's nothing written. There never was, but every crease holds the weight of decades, of stories passed hand to hand. She closes her eyes and lets it rest across her knees. That's all. That's enough. She stays in the clearing for hours, or maybe days. Time has softened its grip. Birds come and go. Wind breathes through the tall grass. She doesn't fold, doesn't teach, doesn't carry. She just lets the silence wrap around her. It feels like being held by something older than memory, something that always knew she'd find her way here, not because she needed to, but because the path needed someone to walk it slowly enough to show others how. Eventually, someone arrives. A young traveler. Dust on their boots, hesitation in their step. They stop at the edge of the clearing, unsure. Aylin looks up, nods once. The traveler approaches, removes a cloth from their satchel, offers it with both hands. It's carefully folded. The stitch is uneven, the corners soft. It says, "I've been walking with this for years. I didn't know who it was for, until now." Aylin smiles, takes it and presses it gently to her chest. She doesn't unfold it. She doesn't have to. As the sun lowers, the traveler sits beside her. They don't speak. They just fold, side by side. Aylin folds her last cloth, not with ink, not with message, just shape. She places it on the stone beside her, smooths the edges. Then she leans back, breath steady, eyes soft. The wind moves through the cloth like a whisper that doesn't need to be remembered to be true. And the traveler, holding their own fold now, watches the stillness beside them and understands some stories don't end. They become the silence that teaches others how to begin. The clearing stays quiet long after the light fades. The traveler sits where Ellen once sat, her last folded cloth resting beside them like a kept promise. The stone holds no inscription. The trees do not bend differently. Nothing marks what just passed except the stillness itself. The traveler doesn't rush. They unfold Ellen's last cloth, not to find a message but to feel the shape of her care. It is blank, but heavy with memory, not sadness, not farewell, just presence, like sitting beside a fire long after it has gone out, knowing the warmth lingers anyway. In the days that follow, the traveler begins folding, slowly, carefully, at first only for themselves, then for the wind, then for the places they pass. They leave one beneath a bridge with no water. You can still carry reflection even if nothing flows through you. Another inside a hollow tree. Some things rest for years before anyone notices they were growing all along. The folds do not echo Ellen's exactly. They have their own voice, their own softness. But the rhythm is the same, the breath is the same, and the world receives them the way it always has, with quiet, with thanks. Others begin folding again too, in far-off cities, in quiet kitchens, in small corners where grief once made people quiet. Someone places a cloth beneath a hospital chair. Even if no one says it, you being here matters. A musician leaves one inside a worn case. Play even if your hands shake, the sound still reaches. A child pins one to the wall beside their bed. I dreamed someone waited for me, and when I woke up, I did too. No one signs these messages. No one needs to. The fold speaks in the language beyond names. It says, we're still holding each other, even when we forget how. The traveler reaches a town where folding never took root. People move quickly, voices clipped, eyes averted, but they don't leave. They sit in the square, folding in silence each morning. First day, no one notices. Second day, someone spits near their feet. Third day, a child watches. Fourth day, the same child returns with a scrap of paper and mimics the motion. Fifth day, a cloth is left on a bench. I didn't know I was waiting until you stayed. The traveler never speaks of Elen, but they carry her with them, in the way they wait, the way they listen, the way they fold, not to be noticed but to remind the air it can still be soft. On the edge of the town, the traveler places a single cloth in the branches of a young tree. It flutters as the wind passes, not pulled, not pushed, just moved. The cloth says nothing. But someone walking by slows down, stops, stares, then exhales like they've just remembered something they didn't know they'd forgotten. That's all the traveler needs. They walk on not to spread the fold but to continue it, to keep shaping space where others might find themselves again. And somewhere behind them, the quiet settles in like a companion. It carries no banner, it asks for nothing, it only stays, just like Elen did, just like the fold taught. The traveler walks farther than they ever expected, not to reach a destination, but to keep carrying the hush that Elen left behind. The path now curves through places that feel like memories more than locations. A garden once tended by an old knight now grows wild, but folded cloths hang from the fence. A chapel with no roof holds candles in its stone corners, each lit by someone who didn't stay long but stayed softly. A well in the center of a ghosted town has a cloth tied to its rope. We are not forgotten, even if no one calls our names. The traveler kneels there not to drink, but to listen. The silence hums like a voice too gentle for sound. In a mountain pass, they meet someone folding for the first time. The stranger says, "I thought the fold was only for those who knew what to say." The traveler smiles and replies, "It's for those who are willing to stay while they figure it out." They fold together in the snow, hands stiff, breath warm. The cloths they leave behind are heavy with quiet. One reads, "Not knowing is not failure, it's the start of listening." The wind lifts them into branches where they freeze into shapes that shine in the morning. The folds do not need to travel to last. They only need to land where someone is ready to feel them. In a wide field where no one has folded before, the traveler feels something settle in their chest, not an ending, a return. They unpack the cloth they were given long ago, the one Elen never unfolded. Their hands move slowly. It is still blank, but they see the creases, the softened edges, the worn threads where her fingers once pressed. They place it on the ground, sit beside it, fold their own next to it. Two cloths, one held, one passed. Together they say more than any stitched word could. They wait there until the stars arrive, blinking in slowly like eyes learning how to stay open again. Other travelers pass through. Some stay for a night, some fold beside the cloths and move on. One ties a third cloth to a nearby stone. It says, "I didn't know I could be part of something so quiet." Another adds, "This helped me stop apologizing for how much I feel." The field doesn't become sacred. It doesn't need to. It becomes a place where gentleness is allowed, where people leave without a goodbye. And that's still enough. The cloths are never counted. The names are never written. But the stillness carries each person who rests here. And every fold that touches the earth becomes a promise whispered into the root of the world. You are not alone. The traveler rises one morning and walks beyond the field. They leave nothing behind, because everything they've held is already in the folds. A single cloth remains in their pack. It's soft, blank, carried far, but never given. They don't know where it belongs yet. That's not a burden, that's a gift. They walk on through mist and light, toward nothing urgent. Their steps leave no trail, only the sense that someone once passed through gently, and somewhere behind them the fold remains, not as a story, not as a tradition, but as breath, as pause, as care. And the road once long, now simply becomes the quiet waiting to be held. The traveler walks until the path becomes sky. No village, no final resting place, just space, wide, open, ready. They stop at the crest of a hill where the wind moves like memory, slow, sure, familiar. They sit, not to rest, just to feel. The cloth remains in their pack, soft, blank, untouched by ink, but full of everything that came before it. They remove it carefully, unfold it for the first time in days, not to write, but to remember, to let it breathe. They place the cloth on the grass, smooth it once, then sit beside it with open palms. They think of Callan, who first folded to stay present, of Liss, who learned to pause long enough for others to feel safe again, of Ellen, who listened so deeply the silence began to speak, of every hand that touched the fold without needing a name, and of the stories that never made it into thread, but lived anyway, folded into pockets, tucked beneath stones, tied to branches, held in trembling hands in the dark. The traveler folds the cloth again, not tight, just enough to say, "I'm still here." They do not leave it behind. Not this one. It belongs to no place. It's meant to keep going. They tuck it away, press their hand to the earth once, and stand. The sky shifts above them, not dramatically, just a little softer, a little wider, as if the world has noticed their stillness and is offering stillness in return. When they walk again, their pace is slower. Not because they're tired, because they've learned what kind of attention the world deserves. The kind that notices the folded paper tucked in a fence post, the cloth tied to a stranger's pack, the note slipped into a musician's hat that says, "Your voice helped me stay." They begin to smile more easily, not because things hurt less, but because the fold taught them how to carry things without gripping. And as they move forward, the story of the knight who folded never truly ends. It lives in the gentle hush between two strangers sharing silence, in a cloth laid on a bench without explanation, in a child who learns to fold before they learn to speak, in a weary soul who finds a message beneath their hand just when they needed it most. In you now, because you listened. And whether or not you fold cloth with your fingers, you carry the shape of it in your breath, in your slowness, in your care. The world may not know you're part of this, but the fold does. And that is enough. You are enough. You always have been.